So I guess the first prompt we're going to kind of want to go into, Neil, would be how COVID-19 has made the college kind of take a look at its finances and budget and what we know about the impact it's having. I know we've discussed things such as, the focus is first student focused, but we always have the best interest of our employees in at heart and in mind. That said, what would it be that we need and want employees to know about when they're looking at what has this done to our budget at the college?
I almost want to create three different kind of buckets when we think about the college and kind of how those different buckets kind of have different core operations, and then those kind of have distinctly different impacts on the college's budget, or at least the things that I have to look at to kind of evaluate the budget. And that's before we talk about revenues, which are kind of have a little bit more of an external, which we'll get to in a second. But in terms of just kind of the immediate impact, obviously we've had, some very substantial impacts to how we operate. On the academic side, they've decided to go completely online. Obviously for the spring semester, there's not from a budget standpoint, there's not a concern about enrollment yet because we're working within an existing semester. Those will be thoughts for future semesters. But you still have that immediate potential impact to the budget by just operating differently. So obviously faculty salaries are not significantly impacted here. We still have the same number of courses. Their pay structures are still the same regardless of whether they teach online or in class. So on the academic side, there's not a big immediate impact on the college's budget, except for, which is true for all of those areas, is what do we need to do to support, the online kind of remote working environment. And that's going to be true for all three of them. So I'm going to respond to that one here in just a second, in total for all of them. Then you have kind of the other direct student operations, which generally are just student services, but all the various support services for students. And again, they're impacted in a somewhat different way. And there's actually, in some ways, even more challenges for them as to how they would support students because it's kind of instruction. There's a kind of, not to say that different programs aren't impacted differently, but they're still have the same basic function of delivering instruction. When you get into student services, there's just a lot more variables in terms of how those different areas of student services support students and then how they're impacted. And then we have kind of the kind of core or pure administrative functions, kind of the back office things, and they're also then impacted in a different way. So just to kind of wrap that together, it's kind of case by case, but at this point for ACC, what has been the only kind of material impact, which has impacted all of those areas, is really increases in technology to support the kind of remote environment for those. Some of that cost has been directly to students. Some of it has been around delivering instruction, such as expansions of Blackboard capabilities, and also supporting faculty in various ways with hardware. And then we have, for all the rest of the staff, how do they do their job remotely, which is hardware, software, solutions that have to be put in place. So at this point, really all of the budget impact has been around some added costs around supporting this new kind of operating model. And most of that has been in increases in technology.
Can you go into a little bit more detail for us what this has looked like then in comparison to what was already planned at the college?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And it's actually one of the many examples as to where ACC was already in a relatively good spot relative to our peers and relative to other institutions of higher education to kind of deal with COVID-19. And one of those is we already had a very substantial distance learning program. So we already knew how to do it. We already had a lot of the infrastructure in place to support it. Now, yes, we've kind of taken it to a whole nother scale, but we're not starting from scratch. That was incredibly helpful. That's not true for a lot of our counterparts. A lot of smaller community colleges do not have robust online, operations, and even a lot of the universities, if you think about them, we always think of like the Arizona State University, who kind of conquer the world with an online college, but most universities, they're primarily just serving their campus community. They don't have a robust online, and so you see a very different impact, and you're hearing a lot about the concerns that impacts at universities. And some of our rural community colleges, especially, look a lot like kind of a small university. They have dorms, they have athletics, and it's very much around just supporting kind of their on-campus students. But at ACC, we're a commuter college, and a lot of that doesn't impact us. And almost a third of our students were taking some form of an online or remote class already. So a lot of this has been about how do we ramp those up. And again, what was really a little more impactful and continues to be one that they're trying to work through is how do we provide the support services remotely. But to your point, we'd already started a lot of that. There was a lot of initiatives in the last 2 years around starting to do online advising. We put in a new application to support online and 24/7 tutoring. We were already in the middle of significantly expanding our utilization of Blackboard. But even programs, which of course weren't intended for this, but if you think of our first day inclusive access program, where students now have electronic books. Well, that's a great tool to have in an environment like this. It lends itself very well to distance learning, where you have these things that are already in an electronic model. So I think really for us it's been about just expanding that to scale, and then identifying those areas that needed, that weren't quite there yet. But in some cases, this is kind of making us just accelerate plans that we already had.
I'm going to switch gears a little bit now and talk about the uncertainty that is happening in communities around this period. There's a lot of it, but how would you describe the shape for the college's budget right now, and the way in which we've approached having to take on these expenses and these budget changes?
Right. Yeah. No, I think the word uncertainty that you used in that question was key, and the responses that we're going to have going forward around kind of the future of the budget. It's really it's not so. To be clear, we don't currently have a budget problem at ACC. As it sits right now, even though we've had some added expenses, they're manageable. And the actually the CARES funds that are available to us now from the federal government are adequate to fund quite a bit of those kind of technology costs and other costs we've had. So as of right now in this moment, there is not a budget problem at ACC. It's the uncertainty of the future that we need to start planning for, and that's where going forward as we work through our budget process, which is ongoing right now. In fact, it's going to be how do we stay cautious and kind of be smart, knowing that there's this uncertainty. Everything may be okay. We just don't know that. So what we don't want to do is start making decisions that put us in a bad spot down the road if things don't improve quickly, or if things actually get worse. So we're in a really good position where we can be proactive in how we look at the budget. We're not right now having to be defensive. We can start taking steps right now to kind of prepare ourselves for the worst case scenario and minimize that. And and I think everything will be just fine. What we don't want to do is kind of act like there are no risks and just kind of keep charging ahead. And then all of a sudden, 6 months from now, we do have a big budget problem, and we're trying to kind of back up from there. So we're working on some suggestions that will go to the board as part of the FY21 budget process on things that we think can absolutely maintain core operations. We're definitely wanting to maintain any current service levels to students, and we want to take care of the employees. And so, we weathered the Great Recession without any layoffs. It's our goal to do that again, here. But we also have to recognize that we're going to have to be very thoughtful to do that, starting, right now.
You kind of touched on what I was thinking of for the next question. So when we could look at what kind of example might explain or illustrate a little bit how that maintenance happens, say we are to look toward the fall, and what are the things we need to consider?
Yeah. So, one of the things, so we're kind of shifting a little bit to the revenue side, but it's also, when we think about classes, it's not just tuition and fees, it's absolutely the cost to support those. And usually we look at that, kind of the simplest metric from a financial standpoint is your average class size. That's a very key kind of indicator for us as to how much it's costing us, to deliver that instruction. So, one of the big uncertainties is, what is this going to do to enrollment? We don't make money on tuition at ACC, so it's not so much the lost tuition, it's really what's the impact to the course schedule, and how do we manage that to, to not have a big change in how that model currently works. And so, obviously, and that can be a problem whether enrollments go up or down. It's the uncertainty. It's the significant kind of unplanned for change in what otherwise we're prepared for that creates a lot of challenges on dealing with that change. And the course schedule is one of the largest ones. And so if enrollments go down a lot, it makes it very difficult to manage the course schedule timely and minimize disruptions, while trying to also minimize the impact to the budget. We have ways and we have experiences in doing this, but it's not easy. And there's always that balance between how much do we scale back the course schedule to kind of save cost versus where's that line where you're actually starting to further impact enrollments by doing that. And the good news again is we have a team that's gone through this before. Mike Midgley and his team have a lot of experience, and me and him work together and have many times on trying to find that balance. But we're going to have to be going into it. We'll all be ready, and we'll be ready to know how to do that. But there is risk again, and again, it's the uncertainty. Is it true that if we have a big reduction in enrollments, and then at some point we have to therefore reduce the number of sections, even though we're going to minimize that to the extent possible, but we can't guarantee that we won't have to do that? Will that impact faculty loads? Yeah, it will. But there's a risk there, but we actually don't have anything right now in front of us to say that that's going to happen. And in fact, there's a lot of reason for us to still be relatively optimistic that, that ACC and our enrollments will be generally okay. But yeah, there's definitely the risk. And that creates both the risk, to us as employees, in this particular example, to faculty, but it also therefore has kind of a broader risk to the college's budget, because we have to figure out how to respond to that change.
What are the next steps that happen at ACC to get this process going? We already know we are in the budget cycle right now.
So to me, we're talking about, how do we mitigate risk? And so, we kind of started hitting on it, and I'll just kind of maybe summarize it as to where are those risks really at to the college's budget. And there's really three areas that we have risk to the budget. One of them we just talked about. It's our ability to manage enrollments in a way where we can still maximize enrollments as we always do, but do it in a way that minimizes any negative impacts to the budget. And it's not the easiest thing in the world to do. And so there's a risk there that we don't quite get that right, and all of a sudden we have a multi-million-dollar kind of hit to the budget because of the challenges we have in managing the course schedule. So enrollments, not so much from tuition and fees, but enrollment fluctuations based off our ability, to manage the course schedule based off of those enrollments is kind of a big kind of risk bucket. So we just talked about that one a little bit ago. What we hadn't mentioned yet is there's two other areas of kind of material risk. There's a whole bunch of little things, but I'm just talking about the big stuff that can actually make us rethink kind of our financial model. The other one, which is a very, very real risk at this point, would be substantial cuts in state appropriations. Now, the good news is the state appropriations only make up about 15% of our budget now. They used to make up over 40% of our budget. So the exposure is not nearly as much as it was 10, 15 years ago. But we're still talking about millions of dollars on the table. And so the state is getting hit hard. And I think that's an obvious statement, but we need to recognize that. And they're getting hit in many ways. It's not just in the reductions in sales and therefore sales tax, but the state of Texas gets quite a bit of revenue from oil. And if anybody's paying attention to that, the price of oil is hitting historic lows. Well, that's also going to hit the state's budget as well. Not to mention just all the other economic piece, because we're really tied to the energy industry. But the state's budget's going to struggle. We still have over a year left on the current approved appropriation amounts. And so the likelihood that we're going to get through the next almost year and a half without the state coming back and asking for money, it would just be shocking. So we need to prepare for that. We don't know what it is yet. We don't know how big it is, but it's that uncertainty again that tells us that we should be very cautious in how we use our money in the immediate term, because we don't know to what degree, the state's going to come and basically say, hey, sorry, but we're not going to send you a check in August, and that's happened before. So we need to prepare for that. The third kind of exposure, which is a little bit longer term, which is good, it'll be actually the most impactful, but at least it's further out, is if we actually have a lasting recession because of this, what you have the risk that it starts to impact property values. And the fact of the matter is ACC, because Austin has been a very robust community economically for the better part of 3 decades, we've done quite well in terms of the support we've gotten from the local taxpayers. If that starts to even flatten out where it's not growing anymore, even before we talk about did they actually start seeing reductions, we get over 60% of our funding from local property taxes. So that would be very worrisome. The good news is the upcoming year's property taxes were actually a snapshot as of last January 1, which is pre-COVID. So those are already kind of set for the next year. So it gives us kind of time. We have about a 1-year lag. So we're gonna have to monitor that. But again, we should go ahead and start preparing kind of for the worst case scenario, or at least a bad scenario right now. The good news is we'll have over a year to prepare for it. But those 3 areas, how well can we manage the course schedule and kind of minimize any negative impacts to the bottom line of the budget, our risk with state appropriations, and then our longer term risk that obviously the total economy, but really we're most worried about the Austin economy in this case, is in some type of recession for an extended period, it starts to hit property taxes. So to get back to your question there, going forward, and what we're focused on right now is what can the college do right now to start preparing and planning for those scenarios. And so actually Monday night, or Monday afternoon, I guess we'll be talking to the board, and I'm actually highlighting some of those in the budget, literally highlighting to show what does it look like if we have a 10% reduction in state appropriations? What would it look like if a year from now there's no growth in property taxes, which in our area would be almost a historic, I've been doing this right for now 20 years, and there's only been 1 year where we didn't have growth and it was actually the first year of the Great Recession. And so usually we're used to property taxes growing. And our budget model, and the reason that we haven't had to increase tuition now in 6 years and possibly 7, depending on what the board does next week, is because of the strength of property taxes. So if property taxes kind of flatten out, it will make us rethink the way that we look at things like tuition and fees. It'll also, therefore, that puts pressure on how we think about costs, because then we get worried about how much we raise tuition and fees. So we'll have to see on that one. But the good news is, again, is we almost get a year look out into the future for that and to prepare for it. So right now, our actions will be, we're going to tighten the belt. That doesn't mean we're cutting budgets, but it means we are going to start making sure that we're not spending anything unnecessarily. And what I mean unnecessarily, I mean now's not the time to take on new initiatives or to take any other types of risks. Sometimes we do things just to see if they'll move the needle on student success, and they're good things to do, but we have to invest in that. Now won't be the time to do that. Now it's going to be the time where we really focus on kind of existing kind of core operations, focused on how do we maintain and ensure that we maintain existing enrollment levels, existing student support, existing compensation and benefits. So yeah, that means we're going to have to think real hard about adding any more to compensation and benefits until we get more certainty. That could be 6 months from now and then everything's good. But until then, we want to be very cautious.
Thanks, Neil. I'm good. We covered the gamut, so thank you. Anything else you think that based on conversations you've had or heard from employee associations or anything else within cabinet that we want to use this time to address?
Again, we want to reassure at this point employees that they shouldn't be worried. They're about the budget. There may be other things they want to work on, but the budget right now at ACC is stable and we're in a good spot. It's really about be prepared for if things actually get worse economically. If they don't, then great. The money doesn't go anywhere, right? It just sits in the bank. So if 6 months from now everything looks great again, it's not like we can't go back and kind of get back to business as normal. But it's really just, so I think it's important to reassure everybody that, there's no reason for panic. There's no reason for people to be concerned about, mass layoffs or anything like that, which unfortunately is going to happen. We're going to hear about it. It's going to happen in higher ed. We're going to see it happen, at institutions that we know. ACC is in a good spot, but we need to use that strength right now to really kind of prepare for it so that we can make sure that we can have that same message, a year from now, 2 years from now. And I think we're in a good position to do it. Other than that, I think, we're really just still focused on, we still have work to do. We've done an incredible job to kind of stabilize the college operationally and to transition into this remote environment. And that's everybody. I mean, that took everybody to do it, right? So that took problems that had to be solved, but it also meant that people had to be understanding and willing to kind of work and learn in this new environment. And right now, it looks like we've done a really good job of that initial response. But we still have work to do for this to be an ongoing, kind of situation. And so we're all still working on that. So we've kind of all shifted gears, the administration, to not just trying to, kind of plug holes, but now we're kind of looking more longer term. Um, you know, what does this look like in the summer? What does it look like in the fall? We can now start to get kind of in front of, I'll say the curve, it's a different curve, but get in front of that curve so that we can, again, be more proactive and less reactive. So that's what we're focused on right now, is trying to figure those things out. But at this point, I feel really confident about the budget. And again, it's really a testament. Maybe it's better to be lucky than good. I don't know. So whether we good or were we lucky? But a lot of the things we have done and a lot of things that we plan on doing in the coming months are actually things that were already on the college's radar. They were already things that we had plans to do, or we're already in discussions about. It's really just been a question of, can we do them faster now? And can we do them larger? So obviously there's been a kind of a scope change. We might have been talking about supporting 20% of our students in the model, and now we have to do 80% of them in this model. But at least we already had kind of those plans on paper. Means we also had kind of the research and the knowledge on what we needed to do. In a lot of cases, we already had contracts in place to do them. So we've already gone through. So, we've ended up in a really good spot. And now it's really about how do we just make it better? And then, of course, the big question everybody wants to know is how long is it going to last? And we don't know. But at this point, well, we're shifting gears to say we're going to make decisions as though some of this is in for the long haul, and we'll be prepared if it goes on through the fall, through the spring. Who knows? We'll be ready. I think we're doing good, and I think the budget, again, it may not be as rosy as it would have been. We may not get as high a raises as we would have gotten, and definitely we never get as big a raise as we wanted. But it's a lot better to be thinking about the fact that I may not get a raise than whether or not I may not have a job. And so I think we'll all do well to kind of keep that in mind. And I think we can all feel comfortable that we've got a good path forward to ensure that that's true. So obviously the risk to that, to be fair, is on the faculty side, and we're talking about adjunct faculty when we say that, because they're the ones that are most exposed to big changes in enrollment. But again, it's way too premature to speculate even that that's the case. Is it possible? Sure. But there's actually a lot of evidence to say it could absolutely go the other way. We could absolutely, and historically, we'd be getting ready for record enrollments right now. It's kind of this health scare part is what makes us uncertain as to how people respond to it. But ACC is in a really good position to minimize the impacts to enrollments. And so I'm still kind of cautiously optimistic